War. It's such a fundamental and often brutal part of the human story. It's a force that has shaped entire civilizations for literally millennia. So in this explainer, we're going to peel back the layers of conflict to really understand its timeless nature, the core reasons why we fight, and its constantly evolving character, the frankly terrifying ways how we fight.
Okay, so let's just dive right in with the big one, right? The central question that kind of haunts all of us. Why? Why, with all our so-called progress, does organized violence remain such a constant in our lives? To even begin to get a handle on this, you first have to understand the sheer cost.
Just look at this number, 187 million. That is the estimated number of people killed in wars during the 20th century alone. Just let that sink in for a second. It's a figure so staggering, it forces you to look past the headlines and really try to understand the deep-seated mechanics of conflict.
So, to find some answers, we have to start at the very beginning. We need to look at what you could call the engine of war, the fundamental drivers that have pushed us toward violence time and time again.
First off, what even is war? Well, at its most basic, it's a conflict between organized political groups. But what I find really fascinating is where the word itself comes from. It's rooted in this old Frankish German term, Vera, which means confusion and discord. And that just perfectly captures what the famous military theorist Clausewitz called the fog of war, that state of total chaos and uncertainty on the battlefield.
So, to help cut through that fog, analysts often use a really simple but powerful framework. It's called the triple R model, and it's a great way to understand how simmering tensions can suddenly explode into all-out war.
And here are the 3 steps, laid out right here. First, you need reasons. These are your grievances, maybe some historic injustice, or a goal, like grabbing new territory. Second, you gotta have the resources. That's the people, the weapons, the strategic advantages you need to actually wage a war. And finally, the third and maybe most important are resolve. That's the breaking point. It's the moment a group decides that talking is over and fighting is the only way forward. When all 3 of those things click into place, well, that engine of war starts running.
Okay, so that's the why, but what about the how? Because for as long as we've had reasons to fight, we've been inventing new and frankly more terrifying ways to do it. Let's shift gears and look at the arsenal and see how the tools of war have evolved. For more than 1,000 years, this was the undisputed king of the battlefield, the catapult. We're talking about machines that could launch projectiles weighing over 300 pounds, that's about the weight of a panda, across 3 football fields. They were built to do one thing: smash castle walls into rubble. But get this, the catapult wasn't just about brute force. Back in 1346, during the siege of Kaffa, Mongol armies used them to launch something far more sinister over the city walls: plague-infected corpses. Yeah, you heard that right. This is one of the very first recorded examples of biological warfare in history. It just goes to show you that psychological and unconventional tactics are nothing new. The catapult's long reign finally came to an end when gunpowder showed up in Europe in the 1300s, and that kicked off a technological arms race that just exploded during the Industrial Revolution. You get metal-cutting lathes making cannons stronger, and then in the 1850s, cheap commercial steel makes a whole new innovation possible: rifling.
And the difference this made was just incredible. See, the old smoothbore cannons were super inaccurate because of something called windage, basically the gap between the cannonball and the barrel. Rifling was the genius solution. By cutting spiral grooves inside the barrel, it spun the shell, making it fly straighter, farther, and with absolutely devastating accuracy. It literally changed the face of the battlefield overnight.
And of course, it wasn't just the guns. The ammunition was in its own arms race. We went from simple iron cannonballs to hollow bombs packed with explosives. Then came special shells with studs designed to catch those rifling grooves. And eventually, you get hardened armor-piercing shells, like the Palliser, designed specifically to punch through the new ironclad warships. It was a constant back and forth. Every new defense sparked a brand new offense. But here's the really crucial point. Even as the weapons change in these dramatic, unbelievable ways, the fundamental nature of war, the core strategies, the human challenges, it all stays remarkably the same. The playbook has some very, very old rules. And you can't talk about timeless rules without mentioning the master, the ancient Chinese strategist Sun Tzu. This quote, written way back in the 5th century BC, is as true today as it was over 2,000 years ago. Deception is and always has been a core principle of conflict.
And you can draw a straight line from then to now. The Mongol warriors were masters of the feigned retreat, baiting their enemies into perfectly laid traps. Today, we execute that same principle through psychological operations, or PSYOP. We use information and disinformation to mislead the enemy and control the story of a conflict. It's the same playbook, just with 21st century technology.
Another one of these timeless concepts comes from Carl von Clausewitz, friction. I love his definition. It's the force that makes the easy so difficult. It's basically the Murphy's Law of war. It's not one big thing that gets you. It's the endless accumulation of tiny, unexpected problems. The mud, the bad radio, the wrong map, that just grinds your plans to a halt.
And this slide shows perfectly how friction just adapts to the times. Back in the day, friction was, bad weather or a supply wagon breaking a wheel. But today, it's a whole different game. It's a cyber attack that fries your communication network, a global pandemic that sidelines your troops, or a viral misinformation campaign that sows chaos. The sources of friction change, but the fundamental challenge for any commander is constant.
And all of this brings us right to our doorstep, the modern era. The principles of war might be timeless, but the actual character of today's conflicts is more complex and fragmented than pretty much ever before.
Now, a lot of modern conflicts are civil wars. They're not fought between nations, but within them. And the key here is that it's not just random violence. It involves organized, armed groups, each controlling its own slice of territory. And then, to make things even messier, you often have this layer on top, the proxy war. This is where big, outside powers use those local groups to fight their battles for them, all while trying to avoid a direct head-to-head confrontation. The situation in Lebanon is a really stark example of this. You have local factions being backed by regional powers like Iran and Syria, who then use them as proxies to fight against Israel. The whole country gets turned into this brutal international chessboard, and the consequences for the people actually living there are just devastating. So, at the end of the day, what is it that fuels these modern cycles of violence? This quote just absolutely nails it. Whether it's ethnic tension, political anger, or religious division, the failure to actually resolve these core grievances, the reasons, right from our Triple R model, is what keeps that engine of war running. Look, the technology is always going to evolve, the tactics will shift, the battlefields will absolutely change. But that engine, fueled by unresolved human conflict, just keeps on running. The face of war is in constant flux. The real question we're left with is, what will its next one be?